speaker on the Holocaust and has met thousands of children and adults while speaking about his personal experiences. I'd like to welcome Ben Walker.
Thank you for joining us for a very special program. My name is Patrice Weaver with the Georgia Commission on the Holocaust. The Commission is a secular, nonpartisan state agency that strives to preserve the memory of the Holocaust and promote public understanding of the history. Today, we are very fortunate to have with us Mr. Ben Walker, and he will share his and his family's story of survival during Nazi occupation in World War II. Ben, you can.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you, Patrice, for inviting me. I did not want to speak about the Holocaust for many years. In fact, 56 years, I didn't speak about it until 9/11, 2001, when my daughter and two young children came running to our house, not knowing what was happening. Of course, that was already well known all over the country, and I decided at that time, and with a strike of hijackers on the Twin Towers of New York, I decided to speak about my experiences. I didn't want to speak about my experiences because I saw what the Holocaust has done to my mother. She never wanted to go to a restaurant. She never wanted to see a movie, or she was very sad most of her life. I didn't want to live like this. This is a great country, many opportunities, and I took advantage of it. But another reason I didn't want to speak about the Holocaust, because I spent my life in Israel for 5 years. At that time, in 1951, no one spoke about the Holocaust. And when I asked about one of my instructors who was teaching us in high school why we don't speak, I said, forget about the Holocaust. This is Israel. We fight back. We're strong. We have weapons, and we're not intimidated. So we're Israelis, unlike the Jews in Europe who were afraid, unarmed, and did not fight back as strongly as they could have. Anyway, so here's the story. I was born in a small town in Romania, in the province of Bukovina. Romania is in the southeast part of Europe, and a very north province, which is called Bukovina. That is close to the border, as you see there. It's in orange. Really, Bukovina was split into two parts. The northern Bukovina extended into Ukraine, and southern Bukovina was really part of Romania proper. There was a small village. My grandfather was a farmer. He had a large farm, and I loved to go there on weekends. I was the first grandchild, so I was special. I had 5 uncles, and they took me horseback riding and fishing, and I had a very good life. We didn't have television or radio. In fact, we still used to get lamps for lighting at night, but we knew there was a war going on. But since the population need to have food, we decided nothing much will happen to us. We knew our neighbors. We were friendly. My family, my grandfather and my parents were well respected. This is my mother, and I was still, the town is called Vashkauts, and I was about 8 months old at that time. But next page. My mother was Sally Walzer. We changed our name. I had an uncle that came to the U.S. in the 20s. He changed the Z to a K and became Walker. Her name is Sally Walker, and of course, mine Hebrew name is Benjamin. We realized this is a dictatorship came into power in Germany, who loved strength. He loved military parade, as you can see in this picture. He has always cheering crowd with his strength was his military, and he unleashed it all over Europe with devastating losses, and that how we were affected by that power. And Hitler was the main dictator of Germany, and he developed a very powerful war machine. All the countries, most of the countries were affected. Some of them joined in, like Italy, and including my country, Romania, Hungary, and others fought back. Poland was overrun in 1939 with devastating effect, especially the lie about the Jews not being loyal to Germany, and stabbed Germany in the back in World War I. So he unleashed his army and put the Jews in ghettos, and from there into killing camps, or 5 killing camps. Most well known was, of course, Auschwitz. In Romania, we were treated differently because the Romanian said, "We will take care of the Jews, so you fight the big war." Anyway, so this happened in October. In October of 1941, and gendarme came in and said, "You have to go to the train." So we went 5 o'clock to the train station. We had only a suitcase to carry. I was 6 years old, and I had a sister that was 2 years old. The Germans had a systematic deportation system. Long before Auschwitz, you can see in this picture, Jews were hunted out from their homes, led to a nearby forest, and there in the mass graves they were shot. Most of the Jews in Bukovina and other parts of Romania were deported to Transnistria, a southeastern part of Ukraine. As I said earlier, we were loaded into these car cattles with very little ventilation. We were inside like sardines, trains similar to the one you see in the picture. It was awful because it's still in October, was still a little bit warm, and it was suffocating inside. And as a 6-year-old, all I could do is keep an eye on where my parents were. This train ride took us from the town of city of Chernovitz all the way to the Dniester River, and there the train unloaded its cargo of humanity, and we had to cross a very tough river. As you can see right here, this river runs into the Black Sea. And we crossed the river very precariously with the humanity on the left, and there were logs tied together, which was made into a raft. And we crossed the river into the city of Mogilev. You come back to the other picture before that. The city of Mogilev had a bunch of warehouses, and we were put into a warehouse and make makeshift into a ghetto. Um, there was a there was no running water. There were no facilities, no food, no medicine. We were there, but soon enough, there were people from outside the city of Mogilev. The farmers especially came, and they brought some food, some bread, some eggs, whatever. And they traded for items such as jewelry, um, linen, um, all kinds of things that we still had in our possession. And when you ran out of things to trade with the farmers, people were getting sick in this town. People were getting sick because we were ill, and uh, and sickness, as you can see, today's pandemic doesn't stay in one place. We Many of the Nazis, especially Romanian, were persuading young girls to come outside of the ghetto to be educated, to become nurses, but that was uh, a, a lie. These are young girls believing the propaganda, and they were shot. Many people were shot in unmarked graves all over Ukraine, all over Romania, because Romania didn't have the sophistication of killing people that the way the Germans have developed, like Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, and others. Here you can see the Nazis, German leading population, and shooting them in the forest, shooting them into mass graves. Long before Auschwitz started, the Holocaust really started in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, in Romania, and part of Poland, where people were led near town in mass graves and shot right in the back. You can learn about that there is a book called Holocaust by Bullets. Uh, and here you can see in a ghetto, the largest ghetto, of course, was in Warsaw, Poland, 1941. The children became beggars. There was very little food. A ghetto is really a prison for hundreds or thousands of people uh, locked up in a certain block of a city. You cannot get in, you cannot get out. Warsaw Ghetto was one of the largest ghettos in Europe. Over 500,000 people were in it. The only way in and out was through the sewer canals. And it was a means of making the population suffer. And then the propaganda continued with the Nazis. If you are suffering, you hop on a train and we'll get you a better place. Of course, that was a fraud. The train led them only to the gas chambers. Young children were also deported, as you can see here, and different orphanage where the parents already have died. Young children were gathered by volunteers and doctors, and there are many, many people who were saved. Many young children were saved in that way. The next. Here are the worst killing camps. Trains were led to Chełmno, Sobibor, Majdanek, Belzec, Treblinka, and of course the infamous Auschwitz, where over a million people died during the war. Of course, that was all the Jews were from Poland, from Czechoslovakia, from Amsterdam, from Western Europe, from Germany, and Italy, and other parts, especially Hungary, toward the end of the war, were transported to these death camps. But Romania decided to have its own Holocaust, so they moved us into the emptiness of the fields, and there, as you can see, soldiers killing. But I told you earlier about the think about killing by bullets. Here it is an example. Near Kiev, there was a massacre of Jews, and 100,000 Jews died from Jews from Kiev and Odessa and other parts of the world were into the mass graves. Sometimes these people didn't even die yet. You can see a picture here in Ukraine, a soldier which shoots the guy in the back and dumps it in a mass grave. Dumps him in a mass grave. These mass graves were dug by Ukrainian farmers who were happy to participate. For that, they were rewarded with the clothing and the shoes and whatever else possessions the victims had to offer at that time. And then, of course, Germany, being an efficient country, developed more efficient ways of killing. Romania was not that sophisticated. I said that before. Well, here we are in Mogilev, and you see all over eastern part of Ukraine where about 250,000 Jews from Romania were deported, and they had several camps, several ghettos, and this part of Romania, for better, they called it Transnistria because the name of the river was Dniester River. So this is the other side of Transnistria. And the people, as I mentioned, in Mogilev were getting sick as a result of the ghetto. So they decided they don't want to have the ghetto. So they told the Romanian soldiers and officers, get rid of this ghetto, and they did. Some people went to different kind of villages all over Transnistria. We had to walk about 20 miles to Kopaigorod, a small village, and there, of course, were barns where the farmers kept their horses and so on. It was a sample barn in Ukraine. And we were put in the barn. It was cold. There was no heating system. There was no food or medicine. And in the barn, you have straw for the animals. And each family had a corner of the straw in a place, and that's where we slept. Farmers came to trade, but there wasn't much to trade. So in the spring, we would go and look in the forest for wild onions, mushrooms, berries, and things like that. At some time, we were looking into the fields. Perhaps some potatoes were leftovers from the harvest, or some apples still left on the tree. And that's how young children were going all over to look for food for their families. One day, my father always liked to wake up early in the morning. And one day I said, Dad, wake up, wake up. He didn't move, and he was dead. Was very, very sad. Very, very sad. But some other people who are a little stronger had to move the dead out and bury them in the frozen ground, which was most difficult because they didn't have the tools for burial. And so they did the best they could. So maybe it wasn't deep enough. So the wolves and foxes in the woods came by smelling human remains. And so in the spring we would see the human bones and skeletons all over the fields. About 3 weeks later, my younger sister uh, also died. And so my mother was afraid that if she dies, who I was 7, 8 years old, who was going to take care of me? So she finally, about in the year about 40, early 44, she gave me up into a orphanage, a similar orphanage to that in Mogilov, and all over places where became orphanage. The orphanage was much better situation. In that barn, there were lice and all kinds of human waste all around me. It was awful. An orphanage, at least I could sleep in a bed. I could eat, also have a good meal once a day. And we didn't, I was already 8 years old and I have never been to school. But this orphanage was run by volunteers and they kept our morale up. So we were happy to sing and be a little more with my own age group. Hoping the war will start coming to an end. Due to research, Patrice Weaver found from Yad Vashem a list of youngsters who were in that orphanage I was, circled here in red. You can see my name, Benjamin Walzer, my father, Aaron, my mother, Sally, and the town we came from. As you can see, I was listed as 7 years old. And I will always be grateful to Patrice for finding that out. I didn't know there was such a thing. So obviously, there's some documentation. It's the only documentation I have that I was there at that time. Okay, next. Well, the war started going badly, especially in Stalingrad. The Nazis were defeated and had heavy losses, and the Russian, the Soviet army was pushing the Germans to the west, and then of course in 44 you have the Normandy invasion by the Americans, Canadians, and British soldiers, and they began pushing towards the east. So you can see Germany was squeezed from the east and from the west, and from the south as well, as the Americans made their way through Italy. My mother was still in that barn. As you can see here, a picture of the German forces retreating. There was no fuel. There were no trucks. The only thing that really moved were these horses that were probably in the barn that I was in. Anyway, the mud and the rain and the miserable weather didn't help at all. I'm glad it was in our favor. And the Stalingrad, the Hitler was very comfortable in his office, but he thought they can move on. The German army could move on, but they didn't realize that partisans and other underground groups were cutting communication, and troops that are fighting a war, they do need clothing, munition, food, and these were cut off. The supply was cut off because the railroads were bombed or exploded by a lot of underground partisans. Many Jewish partisans, many women Jewish partisans fought back in the territories that the Nazis were holding on. So they were in bad shape because a failed leader who had great imagination. Now here you can see these are not poor Jewish refugees. This is what happened to the German army. They were now prisoners of war, hundreds and thousands of them. And you can see this guy wrapped in a blanket. When you have 30, 40 degrees below zero, that's cold. That's really cold. And there is no appetite to fight when you're hungry and you don't have the supplies or munitions, or the most important, the leadership who ran away from that war and helped defeat the Nazi war machine that in the beginning you saw how polished they were and how proud Hitler was of them. Look at them now. This is what the war has caused these human beings, the same misery that we had: cold, hunger, disease. An 18, 19-year-old German soldiers thinks about his parents at home, his girlfriend, says, what am I doing in this forsaken country? The Russian went all the way and liberated Auschwitz, one of the worst camps, one of the worst concentration camps. What I said earlier, over 1 million people died. Here you see the barracks, the women barracks, lying in crates, and they liberated them, and they were treated at the best they could, and many have suffered death and diseases, and these are a few who were still hanging in there. Okay, next. These are typical children survivors when they opened the Auschwitz camps and other camps. As you can see, they're starved, but they're happy to still be alive. In the West, here the General Dwight Eisenhower, who, by the way, became also the President of the United States, was shocked when he liberated a camp, Ohrdruf in Germany, near Dachau. The Americans liberated Dachau and saw the dead civilians in that place. He did something very, very good. There was no CNN or Fox or any of the media. So he took a bunch of German in a town nearby and showed them what their soldiers have created, what their government has done to innocent people, over 6 million of them, and 50 million all over Europe. And they were shocked, nevertheless, because they kept this secret hidden from the general population, so they wouldn't know what they were doing. Here are the numbers. I can see them very well, but each country is listed with how many people were killed, Jewish killed, because he had in mind to have a final solution for the Jews, and called Judenrein, that will have no Jewish population in Europe. Romania itself, almost 50% of all the Jews were annihilated in camps by bullets and other places. My mother in 44 was liberated and came to the orphanage in April to pick me up, and she said, "We're going home." Well, I was very delighted, very happy, because I remember my grandfather's home where I spent most of the time. And there we are coming to 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 my home, and my mother, I see somebody else is living in the town. And so in this house, somebody else is occupying, and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry," said the lady that lived in the house of my grandfather. "I didn't know you would survive." So my mother asks if she can go up in the attic and get some, came back in the attic with a box with letters and postcards that we had collected uh, from my uncle and my aunt who were living in New York. In 1945, late 45, we had to move from that part of Ukraine because Ukraine became part of the Soviet Union, and we went into a town about 100 miles west of Bucharest called Slatina. And we lived there in an apartment and we wrote to our relatives, and they sent us packages with food and canned goods. Never seen vegetables in a can. I grew up on a farm, and when you need a carrot or a tomato, you go in the yard and pick it up. Here was a can with a vegetable, didn't know how to open it. So I took a hammer and nails, and I opened it, poured out the water. I finally managed to open the lid of the can, and there were green beans already cooked. Wow, what a country. Vegetables cooked in America, here it is in Romania. I was so surprised. I said, it must be a fantastic country. I would like to go there. And in the meantime, I had to go to school because I haven't been to school yet. I went to school, and as you can see, every student in high school had to wear a hat. I know many schools in this country use uniforms, especially private schools wear uniforms. My hat had a symbol of the school, and no one was allowed to go after 9 p.m. on the street. We applied to go both to Israel, a new state. I had my bar mitzvah in 48, in May 48. It was not that important because my mother gathered about 10 men in that town to have a minyan. And we had a bar mitzvah, and she baked a cake. But most of the people were talking about bigger things than myself, and that is the creation of a new country called Israel. So we applied to go to Israel and the United States. And we waited for approval. And we waited 5 years. After 5 years, the postman came with 2 envelopes. You go back. One envelope says you can go to Israel, and one envelope says you can go to the United States. For us to go to the United States, we had to make our way to Italy or France and pick up a boat to cross the Atlantic. There were no jet or airplanes flying across, and we couldn't afford either one of them. But the trip to Israel was free. I think it was donations from the United States that made it possible for many refugees from all over Europe to go to Constanza, and from there by ships to Israel. So we picked Israel, a lot closer and not that expensive. It was a crowded ship, and I made it in 19 1951. April 1951, the ship arrived in Haifa, and we were taken into another camp where many, many immigrants were from all over Northern Africa, the Middle East, and of course, Europe. These were Jews from Morocco, from Algeria, from Egypt, and I didn't speak the language, and I wasn't. But they took us to a kibbutz. The kibbutz is called Nitzanim. We were called Eitanim, the group. Most of these youngsters were Holocaust survivors, and here I was circled in red, and these were our teachers. His name is Nelu, who taught us the sciences, physics, chemistry, and so on. Eliezer was teaching us Bible, Hebrew, and Jewish literature, and Nahama took care of everything else. We were very happy as a group of youngsters, 15, 16 years old, worked half a day in the field, in all kinds of areas of agriculture. And in the evening, in the afternoon, we were studying with our teachers. I was very, very happy. I was in a kibbutz for 2.5 years. And then once you reach the age of 18 in Israel, you must go in the military service. And that's what most of these people did. And I was in the military from 53 through 56. I achieved I was a sergeant and training other groups, and very proud to have been in the Israeli army. But my mother immigrated to the United States back in 53, and she kept and lived and married my uncle, Harry Walker, in Orlando, Florida, and they kept writing to me after the military to please come to the United States. And so I did, and came in August of 1956 to Orlando and started learning the language, English. And then I was accepted to the University of Florida, where I graduated in 1960. And after that, I went to Syracuse University. And during the Syracuse graduate school, I was in graduate school when I met my beautiful young lady who came over to this country from Chile, South America. She was on a Fulbright scholarship. In fact, her parents came from the same town that I was born in. But Chile was the only country willing to accept Jews from Europe during the Holocaust. So her father and mother settled in Chile. She got a degree at the University of Santiago, and she was given a scholarship to come here, Fulbright scholarship, to come here and study in the United States. We met in Syracuse, and we got married in Orlando in 1966. We have 2 wonderful children. There's my wife, myself, my mother, and my youngest daughter. And here we have already grandchildren. Ronit, my daughter, went to Harvard Law School, and she's a judge here in Atlanta. My wife was a teacher at Lovett School. My youngest daughter was also married. And here we have 3 wonderful grandchildren, 2 of which are in college, and 1 is finishing high school this year. and will be going to Vanderbilt. Uh, that is, Micah will be in Vanderbilt. Sam, who is now 20, is in University of Texas in Austin, and Kira will be graduating this June from University of Pennsylvania. I lived here in Atlanta for over 50 years. I was the educator, the first full-time educators of Temple Sinai. I'm semi-retired. Here is my grandson, Sam, and my family. Uh, this is in Rome, Italy. They toured Rome, and this was an arch where the Roman emperor who conquered Judea, says Judea Capta. Anyway, so that's my story. And if anyone has any questions, I welcome them, and I hope I'll be able to answer them all. And I'm very happy to be part of the Georgia Holocaust Commission. Here is, I light a candle with a liberator, one of the American soldiers who liberated me, Mr. John Yates. I remember him well. And also in the back is a, a one of the legislators, I forgot his name, and with the Georgia Commission. Was thanks to the Georgia Commission, I was able to speak many towns in Macon. We had workshops in Macon and Rome and Dahlonega and Augusta and Blue Ridge Mountain and many other places. There are also some heroes of the Holocaust. Janusz Korczak, I told you about. He was one of the, he was a doctor, a very known surgeon who the Nazis said, you can go free. But he decided to follow. He was the head of an orphanage. He decided to go with the children, and he was killed. Darina Sandler, she was a nurse, the only one allowed to get into the Warsaw Ghetto, and people were giving her babies, and many babies that she saved. And if you saw the movie Schindler's List, you'll know exactly what kind of work she was doing. She was taking these babies and finding them homes in Warsaw. Sugihara, Juni Sugihara, was a diplomat in Lithuania, and he was giving visa day and night, even though the government in Tokyo told him not to. Tokyo was part of the Axis with Germany, but he continued doing that and saved many Jews from extermination. And one of the greatest heroes, Raoul Wallenberg, he was a diplomat in Budapest. He went on a train, already the train which was ready to go to Auschwitz and giving out visas. He rented a large warehouse, and he saved many Jews from the train, and many, as consequently, children and grandchildren of these Jews were saved by this man who risked his life, and all of them risked their lives to save others. And for that, we have a wonderful forest in Yad Vashem. There are Christians who resisted the Nazi extermination, but unfortunately, more people were cooperating than resisting, and the majority were plain silent that I'm not bothered, I'm not affected, I'm not Jewish, so they did not do anything. That's the silent majority. And this happens always when some small group is persecuted, the silent majority. There will be some will risk their their career, risk their life even. We see it most of the time in other parts of the world, including the United States. And but most will not bother to get involved. Anyway, I hope you have some questions for me, and I would prefer to speak directly to you instead of just going through Zoom. I have philosophy, and that is ABCD, which you can read. And I like to say that I'm very happy to see my grandchildren succeeding in college, and I'm very privileged to speak through the commission and other to go to universities and students and high schools and tell my stories.
Wow, thank you so much, Ben. We really
You're
appreciate
welcome.
you giving us your time today and allowing me to record this. We are all looking forward to the end of this isolation when we can be with you in person. I would just like to leave you with one more thing. As the famous author, Holocaust survivor, and Nobel Peace Prize recipient Elie Wiesel said, "When you listen to a witness, you become a witness." On behalf of the Georgia Commission on the Holocaust, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone who joined us. Thank you, Mr. Walker. It's our privilege and our honor to have you here in this space. I'm gonna spotlight you, and I'm gonna invite every one of you to open your camera so you can participate with us. I see there is a few questions in the chat. We will answer the one we can. But first of all, I want to start with Sarah, the student that joining us to ask her question. So Sarah, if you
Hello. First, I would also like to thank Mr. Walker for sharing his story. It's truly a privilege to be able to hear a survivor. It's not something that we'll get for much longer, so I really appreciate you being here today. My question for you to start out is, what is something you hope people learn from the Holocaust that might not be talked about enough?
Okay, can you repeat that question for me, please?
Yes. It's what is something you hope people learn from the Holocaust that might not be talked about enough?
Learn from the Holocaust. Um, that you can be resilient, and if things are down like they are today with the coronavirus around the country and around the world, that things can be better. There is already a vaccine available, and I hope that many people are using that possibility. And I regret very much there's so many dead people who didn't make it, and this is kind of for them, for people who didn't experience the Holocaust. It's kind of a Holocaust in itself, because you probably many people lost parents, grandparents, and so on. So I hope that what we can learn, that you cannot exterminate entire people altogether. A genocide should not be used anywhere, and that the Hitler wanted to exterminate the Jews in Europe and the rest of the world, and he was not successful. And I'm very happy he wasn't successful. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. I would feel myself very lucky. And it's a great country. I have many great opportunities. I'm living the American life, and I put the Holocaust behind me a long time ago, but I didn't speak about it until 9/11, 2001, when my daughter came running with two young children. At that time, there were only two, and afraid of what is going to happen. And I said, I think there's a lesson to be learned here. That some people are willing to kill themselves to kill others. We've seen it in many wars, in many in the Intifada in Israel especially. And I hope that we learn those lessons, that even though there is darkness and so forth, there is a Sujihara, there is a Mr. Schindler, there is Irina Sandler, and there's some very good people all over the world. That's the best answer I can give you.
Thank you.
And I will
Hi,
move to
Mr.
the
Walker.
next question. Chris.
Hello, Mr. Walker. Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. My question for you is that I know you mentioned that you were an educator at Temple Sinai, and I was wondering what your relationship with Judaism is today, and was there a process for you to develop that relationship after the Holocaust?
What kind of relationship?
Just like if you were like raised in an Orthodox family, are you still in an Orthodox family, or I know a lot of people have to take a break from religion after like other survivors that I've had the opportunity to hear from. Was that an experience that you had?
Oh, okay. Well, uh, for many years, I didn't want to speak about the Holocaust. It was so tragic, so unbelievable. And exactly as I mentioned before to Sarah, I didn't speak about it till 9/11, 2001. That's about 56 years since the Holocaust, since the World War II ended. I didn't speak about it for several reasons. I saw what it did to my mother. She never wanted to go to a restaurant. She never wanted to go to a movie. She enjoyed her family. She loved her grandchildren and great grandchildren, but her life was gone because she lost so much. And when we were, I showed you a picture in the kibbutz, and we were in a kibbutz. Most of those youngsters were survivors also. And one of the, we visited Jerusalem in one time, and Jerusalem was divided, of course, between Arabs and Jews. And some of the Jews that were there were ultra Orthodox, and we were from the kibbutz where we were wearing shorts and T-shirts, and they came out calling us names and so forth. We had to be rescued by the police. And I said to my educator, Nelu, I said, who are these people? He said, oh, don't worry about it. These are ultra Orthodox, they will disappear. Well, guess what? They're not disappearing. They're increasing, and they're making themselves well known in Israel right now, especially with the pandemic. So he said, forget about the Holocaust. This happens that we are here, Israelis. We're strong. We're fighting. We're surviving. And the Holocaust was shown because we were in Europe. We were weak and didn't have the strength to fight back, of course, and therefore forget. And it worked for me. I forgot about the Holocaust until I told you 9/11, and then I started speaking, and that's you were a few of the people. As far as Temple Sinai, you said you teach at Temple Sinai. No?
I know you had mentioned you had you taught there, and so I was curious, like if that was part of your relationship of like developing. But I know
Yeah,
you mentioned that.
I will be speaking to the sixth graders at Temple Sinai this a week from Sunday. So I spoke to thousands of students before the pandemic came, and now we have to do it through Zoom. And so I'm doing it. This group is the first one that I'm using my computer and zooming to see some of these beautiful students that I see in front of me listening to me. And today is 76 years of liberation of Auschwitz. And they decided somehow that this is going to be the day that will remain in history as the Holocaust Day. But we have other days. In April, we have a Holocaust Day, and we have other Holocaust days and so forth. But now it's really becoming an important historical event. And in 1950s, no one ever spoke about it. The tragedy was so big that no one wanted to talk about it.
Thank you
Anyway,
so
I
much.
hope I answered your questions. I'm not sure.
Yes, thank you so much.
You are.
Um, Hi, Mr. Walker. Just first, I just want to thank you because my parents are from the Soviet Union, and my entire great grandpa's side of the family died during the Holocaust. So I just feel like when I hear your story, I'm more in tune with my own family's history. But my question is, coming out of the Holocaust, and now that it's been some years since you've been there, what are you most grateful for just in life, and just now that you're here with us today?
What I most grieve about?
Yeah, what are you most grateful for?
Grateful.
Yeah, just like for having escaped the Holocaust.
There is
Now that you're
nothing
here.
grateful I have for the Holocaust. If
Oh
not
no,
the
I
Holocaust, I'm
oh, sorry,
sorry.
sorry. Yeah, sorry. No, I didn't mean in that respect. I mean, now that like you're here with us, now that you've escaped the Holocaust, what are you
Uh,
most grateful for just like in life?
what am I most grateful in life now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. That's a very good question. I'm sorry about what is happening to your grandparents, but you're here and you live in freedom and you're getting a good education, and I hope you're going to use it for good. Um, I am grateful for the many opportunities I had in this country. I'm grateful that I have a very, very wonderful wife, 54 years married, and I have a wonderful daughter. Uh, I lost one daughter to a Jewish disease called familial dysautonomia. My daughter Ronit has three children. Two are in college, as I mentioned, and one is going to college this fall. I'm grateful to be alive, to be honest. I'm grateful that there is something to eat. I know what hunger is. I'm grateful to be able to go to a doctor and get the medicine that I need. I'm so grateful that I didn't have to go and look in grounds to look for a frozen potato or find something in the forest to eat. Uh, I wouldn't sit at a table without saying a blessing over the food. I don't go to synagogue every week or every Shabbat, but I will not sit at a table not saying a blessing over the food for which I'm so grateful, because I know what hunger is. Most of us experience hunger on Yom Kippur if you fast, and you know the feeling waiting for the minute to be over with so you can enjoy your meal. But imagine you have a Yom Kippur almost every other day. That is, this country has a lot of food, and I am very sensitive to it, and especially sensitive to people who don't have enough to eat. And that really bothers me a great deal in a country that is producing enough for the rest of the world for people to go hungry. That bothers me a great deal. Anyway, I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
And any other questions that anyone has, please?
Is anyone have a question who wanna unmute himself and ask, or to write it in the chat? Sorry.
Hey, Mr. Walker, I have a question. How you doing? My name is Rowie. I work for Hillel, and I just wanted to ask, when was the last time you visited Israel?
Yeah, where are you? I don't see your picture. Oh, oh.
Can you see me now?
You are Roy?
Roy, yes.
Roy. You're an Israeli?
כן, כן.
כן, אתה מדבר עברית. היית כבר בצבא?
הייתי בצבא, כן. I was in
אוקיי, יפה. איפה אתה לומד?
Ani Oved Bilal. So I work for
Hillel.
Hillel at
Okay.
UGA.
I
Yeah.
will go back to English so can all understand. I'm
Yeah.
sure you've met many survivors in Israel when you were there.
Mhm.
This number of survivors is getting smaller and smaller every year. And I think there are about 200,000. Of course, I was a very young child. I was 7, 8 years old in the Romanian Holocaust. And as I said earlier, the Holocaust started with bullets. People were moved to a forest or near a big uh, pit and shot to death. But the Germans are very efficient. And then they developed these camps that in Poland, death camps, trains and trains, day and night, 24 hours were bringing people and they were dying in a gas chamber. But I forgot what your question was.
I asked when was the last time you visited Israel? Because I know you
Yeah,
lived there,
you're
you were a
right. You're right.
soldier, and I'm just curious, when was the last time you went, and if you still have friends
I
and
was I
people that
was
you.
in 2018. That's about 2.5 years ago. I have family in Israel. My cousin is in a Moshav Tzofit near Kfar Saba, and I love Israel very much. I read the Israeli paper, Jerusalem Post, every day, and I spoke to the Tzofim here in Atlanta, and I hope to go there soon, back again soon.
Great. Thank you so much.
Right now, the airport is closed to everything.
Yes. Well, we
Okay.
have some places in Atlanta we can take you so you will feel in Israel. We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Ray, and thank you for everyone. Fortunately, we reached our time. It's already 7. I really want to thank you all for being with us and listen to Mr. Walker's story. And again, it's really, really a privilege for us just to be a witness here. And something that always important me to say in the Holocaust Remembrance Day, it's called Remembrance Day, is because we need to remember. As Mr. Walker said, there's not many survivors, unfortunately, that still able to share their story and to share their memories. And they were the witness, but now we are the witness. We hear the story now. Now it's up to us. It's up to us how the next generation will look like, how the next year is gonna look like. And I really invite you all just to take it in your thoughts of how do you want your children to learn about it? How do you want the society and our culture to look like? So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Walker, again, and everyone who took part in this event.
Well, welcome.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Later out.